Wholeness and balance vibration to everyone. Good day. My name is Savan. Of course, I'm the developer of the Resistance. I'm here with Gene Pablo, Resistance member, Mr. Spirit Matter.
Good day, Resistance.
And today, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be showing you a little bit of behind the scenes on the storyboarding for the series No More Secrets. And we're going to get into a little bit about how we're going to bring the story to the earth now, because we've discussed in the first part of the series how everything has its origin in space, or what I call just the space dust. And as they always say, from the dust ye came, and so to the dust ye shall return. And many have gotten that confused for being the dirt that we see on the ground, but that actually is a misinterpretation. So what we'll get into first is what I wanted to talk about very briefly before we even get into the series, because what you're going to actually be seeing is you're going to be seeing the preparatory phase, a lot of the studying that we do and some of the information that we're ciphering here to get a clear understanding of what exactly is the mission here. What are we on Earth for? What can we obtain here? And I'm sure, just like myself, most people are in a position that are viewing to want to know and to want to be into it and as deep as possible, so that they can make sure that they control the outcome of their future more so than allowing it just to happen. And that's a big part of what being activated is about, is that you're actually active. So you're more of in a preparatory phase about what's going to happen next, not so much as waiting for it to happen. And that actually also brings us to a major point about the pre-diluvian, or the cycle that we just recently got out of, which is the cataclysm. And the understanding that the ancients already knew that that cataclysm was going to take place. It wasn't something that just crept up on the people that were living at that time. And so it's very important to understand that there was a major preparatory phase by many different classes to make sure that their information was preserved. Some of them attempted, of course, to preserve their life in various ways. And we'll even talk about how many of these beings decided to preserve their life within stones and within crystals. But the first part, before we get into that, what we really want to also discuss is where we are at now in the phase of time, so we can bring it right to this point to understand that there's a large part of our reality that is an illusion. And that illusion has really been created because the language in which that we're using is what they call the language of light, or the or English, which has a lot to do with how the angle and the word angle and the word angel actually correspond to one another. And so basically what we're really uncracking here is that this language of light that's in our mind can somehow cause an illusion where we don't see what's directly in front of us. And if, for those that have definitely studied etymology, see that there are many words that we've never looked at, such as the word life and the word file, that are exactly identical to each other, and then wondering why those words are identical to each other, such as the word live and the words evil. And what we've discovered here at the Resistance, and just with the Code of the Matrix and the cipher and the many different things that we've done over the years, is we've discovered the story within etymology and within the ancient language, because the ancient language cannot just be changed or cannot just be covered up because we're still using it now. It's just about what we think words mean and what they really mean, because that's how the illusion is created. To basically have you saying or doing something that is not completely cohesive with itself, meaning unbalanced. You're saying one thing, but you're actually doing another, or it's causing something entirely different than what you think you're saying. So I want to talk about very briefly where we are in this, which is, if you have magicians around you, sorcerers around you, illuminists around you, Kabbalists around you, and the list goes on and on. You have people that are high lamas, you have Buddhists, you have ascended masters, you have all of these different types of graduated human beings. Not to mention the different beings that are outside of the visual spectrum, but that generally comes with the graduation or degeneration of the cycle in which we are in now, which is to understand that we're all connected. Everyone is just on a different phase. So to identify with someone else's phase doesn't necessarily mean that you have gotten more connected with the all. You're always connected. It's just about what you're connected to. And so with this, the reason why I want to bring up these different types of people that are involved in mysticism is to understand that once you know mysticism yourself, once you begin to study the shapes, the letters, the numbers, etc., even in just your discovery of what are these people doing and what is this all about, you become in essence an enlightened person yourself. And in their terminology, they would say you will become illuminated because you've taken this kind of information in your mind, and your subconscious mind is constantly pondering this information. So what happens with an illusionist is that their ability is to bend time. So understand that the Nephilim, the Rephaim, the elder gods, the ancient ones, and all these beings, shining ones, angels, are all, or light bearers and Lucifer, are all saying that they can maneuver and manipulate light. And so that's what this is really all about, because human beings in themselves as a soul has a very strong light force within it itself. And it's not completely made of light, but it doesn't have a major component. So if there is someone or something that knows how to manipulate light, then that's where you would have to automatically assume that a great deal of your reality is being manipulated. That would be the way to wake up. The way to remain asleep would be not to accept these kind of things and just to say, well, you know, life is what it is. But every single thing around us tells us that it's a lot more deeper, especially this language. So from that level, we also want to talk about the ark, because that's what the ancients decided they would do. There was a few different thoughts running through the minds of the individuals knowing that the upcoming cataclysm was taking place. Those thoughts stemmed around, one, are we going to be able to preserve our lives? So of course there's the immediate idea of self-preservation. So because there were many of the beings that were into self-preservation, because we know that there's a large part of the reptilian mind construct that is about self-preservation, they immediately began to burrow into the earth and to explore the inner reaches of the earth, because the cataclysm was at least divine enough to be taking place on the surface, majority affecting the surface, and if you got deep enough into the earth, there's a possibility that you can escape it. So you had a group of beings or nations, groups of people, etc., which we can get a lot more deeper into explaining who they are later, or which each group decided to do later. But you had them going into the center of the earth, or burrowing into earth, burrowing into mountains, creating caves and caverns to withstand this upcoming deluge. So that's the first cycle of self-preservation. Then you had the second cycle of self-preservation of the group of higher level beings that were there, which involved the Nephilim and the Rephaim, were thinking of leaving the planet, at least until the cataclysm was over. And so this, I believe, is the first beginning of the idea of going to the moon and building something on the moon so that you can just escape to the moon when the cataclysm on Earth is happening and then return back to Earth after the cataclysm is over. But it wasn't even just the moon. Many people looked towards the stars, and there were, of course, the advanced beings that were on the Earth at that time had not a lot of knowledge about the stars. So there was a different group of beings that decided that they needed to somehow connect with their star origin. And this begins to branch out somewhat like the Fibonacci sequence and how people are imagining they're going to do this. One of the ways was they built a 7-step ziggurat. And each of these 7 steps were different colors. And each of the different colors correspond to different frequencies, and more or less they probably had crystals on each of these levels, just like the pyramids were set up where there was a vibratory frequency for each level. And then because each level is a different color, it became the rainbow bridge. And this is, anyone that is adept would have to understand this terminology now if they were to become even by the title. But a rainbow bridge was built, which was basically an external Merkaba, an external device to actually activate the 7 layers or chakra systems within the body at that point. And the group of individuals that were, so it's very important that the ziggurats were built by one group of individuals attempting to preserve things through stones. Because within the crystals, crystals particularly carry the frequency of other planetary systems. Even at times, there were crystals or stones landing here on Earth from other planetary systems and then coming into our atmosphere and then hitting our planet and then growing from there. And then this brings us to another very interesting point. What I've discovered is that you can actually cross the beginning, as we know it, into science or into physics, or how something is actually created. And you can even stem it into religion or the belief system, or the beginning of most belief systems, which is that there was a one being in which they call Satan, which we just know as Sa, because this word in fact means seed in the Chaldean or in the Sumerian. But this being known as Sa, coming into this atmosphere, whether it was saying that they were saying in the story that it was being thrown out of heaven by another being, which we have to get more into that story to understand exactly what the preliminaries were to this ejection of this planet. But the fact that we're trying to point out now is that when this particular asteroid, or chunk as they call it, the stone that fell from Lucifer's crown, when it was coming into the atmosphere, it began to break up also into particles. Now, if anyone understands the preliminary phase of this planet, it was mostly covered with water. In addition to that, the planet, because being more or less a virgin planet, meaning that there wasn't a diverse type of life form that lived here. Remember, the first men that were created were really all of the same origin and the same blood, and it was only until later on that they started to get more separated and vast as new seeds entered into the womb. But what we're looking at is we're looking at the earth as more or less a virgin womb waiting to receive the seed. And the first seed that comes in splashes into what we would know as now the same fluid that is generally in a woman's womb when she's birthing a child. Because you have to realize that the waters of back then are nothing like the waters of right now. First of all, they say the saltiness of the water was added because of certain meteors that they call bitter wormwood, landing into the waters and giving it a taste in a way in which even the creatures that were living then could not survive, because they weren't even saltwater beings. So there goes one complete delusion where the beings become extinct on one level and then rise into another. So what we're literally looking at is that before all of the sharks and the whales and the crustaceans, leviathans, and all the different things that live in the sea, before they even got in there, what was the fluid like? Because the pH was never disturbed. And so just as you would, if you urinate into a glass of water, the pH is disturbed. So just as all these animals begin to live in the sea, their pH is disturbed. So most people will say, well, where did they come from? What we've been able to identify is that these crystals, or these fragments that are falling from space, are so hot, even as hot as nuclear itself. Nuclear, the heat and the intensity that comes with the nuclear combustion. When landing into this water, we'll call it, the sheer cooling factor in the combustion rate brings forth electrical type force. And this is where I believe the connection with the eel and the L's come from. And with the essence that's already in the crystal from where it's coming from, the space dust, when it hits the sea foam, it does just like everything else that we see in the phase of how something is seeded and then the egg is fertilized. So immediately what begins to grow from this is first essence, not so much as beans yet. And so we're about 15 minutes in, and we're gonna just take a brief moment to take a pause, get some water and different things, and we're gonna get more into this story. But where we're gonna leave off for a moment is just to think about how this origin of most of the beings coming from the sea really ties into the Ma, or the womb that we know. Okay, Resistance went forward, and so we're going to get into the story once again. Mountains, arcs, havens, heavens, etc. And so Gene had also brought up something very interesting while we were on that brief break, which was there's also another process that happens when you have something that's super hot hitting something that's super cool. And that's more or less a 0 point or an implosion point. And so we have a couple of things here that we know that life can be generated off of. We have the implosion of 0 point, which creates more or less a vortex in which life can enter and exit. We have the essence of the stone, which we know, especially by the Grail lore and things that are going on now with them tracking down certain crystals and things of that nature, and the crystals that are in crowns and that were also in ankhs and scepters, that we know that the stones have the power, and we see the stones falling from space. And then we also have the fertile soil of Ba, or the matrix or Ma'at, which is the soil that life can be brought forth. And so we find that the actual beginning of this planet starts with another group of beings that are spawning and reproducing. And there's little known about that when the beginning of the Bible is written, the Bible, or the Babel, as I call it, because these words are the same Kabbalistically, Bible and Babel, or the confusion. Well, and we can see the confusion that's ensued from the book. And that's just something that's already happening, especially in light of all the wars taking place these days. So what we're literally looking at is that according to all the lore that these individuals are following, and we could take this into the Sumerian lore, but it's easier for us to keep it into the Judaistic lore because most people are more familiar with the titles there. But into deeper study, we'll go ahead and show who these individuals are. So from the beginning, we have Adam, we have an Eve, we have a Cain, and we have an Abel, and we have a Satan. And most people say, well, wait a minute, where did Satan come from? People don't realize that in the garden, there was a snake on the tree. And what they're really saying is that the tree is earth. It's always been symbolized as a tree, and then it has branches. And those branches are the fruits that come from it, but there's the roots also. And on that tree, there was a serpent that was entwined around it, meaning that it had burrowed into or gotten affiliated with the tree. And so this comes with what they call grafting. And this is a major part of also the Akkadian lore, which is to mix water and wine or make one become the other. And this is why the beginning of the Bible starts off with a heavy level of don't mate with this one and don't mix with this one. And this is because there was a lot of knowledge of all the different races that were roaming through earth and what they were involved in. But notice, when Cain leaves Eden, as they're calling it, he goes into the land of Nod, which has also been marked as the land of Dar, and he finds a wife. And this is the scriptures that everyone is abiding by that are going through the Bible. So remember, millions of people are involved in this, so it's important to understand exactly what's going on. Because as we function as a collective, you have to know how to talk people out of the insanity or guide them beyond the veil of where they can't see that the priests of Levi are evil, because Levi is evil. And they also do jeans, because they were a jean company. And if you wear blue jeans, then you have blue on your red, because everything down here is red, or the color of the earth. And so if you put blue here, which is the color of the sky, then you become inverted. And that the whole reality or the illusion of bending light is really about inversion, or what they call a tesseract, which is a cross. And so once one learns about the cross, then they can become the Christ, or the stone, which is about understanding your origin in your crystal, because everyone here has a crystal. And this is why the priest of Levi, but you notice Aaron, which stands really for Aryan, was in possession of the breastplate. And this breastplate gave him the power over the tribes. Now, if you notice, there's a heavy level of connection with gems in this case, but there's only a few storehouses around the world for these type of gems. And many of them are in possession of the current controllers. So that's really going to be the beginning of this, because what we have to do now is we're going to be doing a little study, because what we really want to do now is we do want to give you, for those that have been studying, the Sumerian crossover, the Greek crossover, the Christian crossover, the Judaistic crossover. We want to show you throughout all religions, all ancient knowledge, especially with the language, how one story is continuously being told over and over again by a certain group of conquerors who go by the name of Khan, and which is why the word conqueror is in place as such. And that Khan was an actual root to the word Cain, to the word king, that even the word Ankh, which was carried by those that were the ruling pharaohs then, is an anagram for the word Khan, Khan. And just how this connection with all of this knowledge is not only what got us here, as they say, the knowledge of good and evil, that you could not return from the state once you had the knowledge. And this is something that the ancestors had chose to get involved in. But it also shows you not only how to climb down the tree and down the roots, but also how to climb up it, because we can actually witness mankind, man's ascent and descent, and we also can understand now, and we can identify beings that have gone higher and beyond this and what their mind state is like. And so we're going to be opening you up to all of this knowledge here in the series No More Secrets. My name is Seven, the developer of the Resistance, and this is my great friend, Mr. Jean Pablo.